Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Sanders, and this is Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection. Today, we're going to take a look at the watches for men by Piaget, the gentlemanly watches that they have. They have an extensive collection of women's watches as well. There are three main categories we're going to look at, and the first one is the polo. The second is called the Altiplano, and the last one is called the Black Tie. And each one of those will take a look at the kinds of watches they have. A little background on Piaget. And they started in 1874, and the founder was George Edward Piaget. That's the English pronunciation of their names. They sound very different in French. And they were in the Swiss town of La Côte and it's in the Swiss Jura Mountains area. So it's in a place where they have some other watch companies in the Jura district as well. Okay, so let's get started. And the first one I want to take a look at is the Piaget Polo S. And this particular watch it looks a lot like the luxury watches by Patek Philippe, by Audemars Piguet, by Vacheron Constantin, the luxury sports watch, which is almost an oxymoron, but there it is. This particular one is a fairly solid, straightforward watch. It's one I like a lot. I mean, there's no muss, no fuss. Have a date window at 6 o'clock, and then around the inside the bezel, there's the 60-minute count with the indexes, little sticks indicating. Very clean watch. The one that I show there is has the blue dial with the metal bracelet. They have one with a green dial and a green gator bracelet. I like that. I like the color green. It costs more. It's $8,400, whereas your pretty standard Polo S with a gator strap is $8,100. I'm not sure why they did that, but I sort of like the green a lot, so I guess it'd be worth $300 more. The movement in this is got quite a history to it. It's a Piaget 1110P. Now, this is based on a Cartier 1904 PSMC. That's the caliber name, but it's produced by Val Fleurier. Val Fleurier is also producing the Cartier movement too, and they've also have a similar movement for the Vacheron Constantin 56, their entry-level watch. It's an automatic. It has a 48-hour reserve, 4 hertz, and it's a time, has hours, minutes, seconds, and date. And in the steel bracelet, they're $9,900. The street price I found one at for $7,200. It had a white dial. They have that as well. This particular watch is, to me, a very affordable way to get into the luxury sports watch. As far as value for the money, I think you get what you pay for with this watch, and I like the looks of it. It's not radically different, or it's not a copy, even though some people think, well, they tried to copy the Aquanaut, but I think you'll see later on it's probably just an extension of earlier models that they had. The second Polo S is a Polo S Chronograph. And this is 42 millimeter. It has a Piaget 1160P. It's also based on the Cartier caliber 19. It was based on a Cartier caliber, not the same one. It's called the 1904 CHMC. It's self-winding, column wheel operated chronograph movement with small seconds and date. This was introduced in 2012. Now, it's a Val Fourier product. It is also seen on the Piaget's 1160P since 2016. That was when the introduction, they came in with the Piaget Polo S chronograph. In other words, same movement has been there since they started. Now, this one has a huge range in the price. This one, the one shown are 13,200. That's the MSRP. However, I did find one on Chrono 24, brand new, unworn. Street price was $76.50, which is a huge discount, and for this particular chronograph. This chronograph, like the Polo S, the regular Polo S, they look almost identical, except this has the 3 and 9 o'clock subdials. But otherwise, and then of course the pushers at 2 and 4 o'clock. Otherwise, though, it's pretty similar. It's almost identical to the what's this called the Polo S. This is simply the same thing with a chronograph design-wise. And like the Polo S, this one has some comes in different colors and stuff, so you have some kind of choice with it. And the ones that I was looking at, they were all they all had all metal bands. I suppose if you're going to need a chronograph, you need a metal band. Not sure why. Okay, moving right along here. The next one is the Altiplano Ultimate Automatic. This is a new watch. Its caliber is 910p. It's automatic, 3 hertz, 21,600 VPH, 41 millimeters, and this one is in 18 karat gold, 28,400. I found one, a new one, for 19,400. It's about almost a $10,000 savings there. It was in rose gold rather than white gold. Love this watch. It's called the Ultimate Automatic, and running at 3 hertz, you have a very nice watch. I think it's extremely expensive. Not extremely expensive for some of these other watches, but you can get a brand new FP Journe for the same price, Chronomet Souverain, for 28,400 or thereabouts, if you can find one. And so I think they have a tough time with this watch, even though it's a wonderful watch. It's one of the thinnest calibers, and a lot of people may prefer the looks and style over some of the more, I call it, regal ones. You can get I think Groenfeld's Principal is also about the same price. This is the competition that this watch has. Now, something happened, I'm trying to think when, not long ago. I read about the Richemont. Now, this is one of the, this watch, not this watch, but Piaget, as well as Cartier and IWC, all owned by Richemont. They bought back $500 million. In other words, what they wanted to do, they wanted to keep the scarceness of these watches in. Now, typically what happens if you have an overage of some watch model that doesn't sell, you made too many, or people weren't as interested as you hope so, they go into a secondary market. The people at Richemont and most of the other manufacturers refer to them as gray markets, as though there's something wrong. There's nothing wrong with them at all. This is how, if you're a shop and you want to get rid of something, that you can perhaps only send back so much to the manufacturer. The ones going back to the manufacturer, like the ones from China a few years ago, they had a big crackdown on corruption in China, and so people weren't bringing in as many watches, and so they came back here. and people could pick up some really good deals on them. It was one of those things that what Richemont wanted to do, they wanted to keep the price up, so they bought them back, the ones that didn't sell, and didn't destroy them. They sort of took them back in and give them a new paint job, so to speak, like a new dial or a new this or a new that, that would perhaps come out the door as, hey, this is a new watch. And I suppose it was in some respects, at least a new design. Now this one, like I said, this Altiplano Ultimate Automatic is one of the newer ones, so they're not really having a great deal of those that they're having over. Which also, too, they're a little smarter on the on how many they make. Now, this is the Altiplano Ultimate Concept manual watch. Now, this is brand new as well, and what looks like a sort of like a line down the middle, that's the side view of this watch. Really, it's they refer to it as the world's thinnest mechanical hand-wound watch. Now, you can see on the right side, right there where your crown would be, there's no crown sticking out. Instead, you pull that out and wind it on that little block that's right there where the crown should be. This watch is really something. I love it. They have it, like I said, it's brand new, and you can get the price on request. I put around $23,000 because I did find one. I don't think it was pre-owned, but somehow somebody got a hold of it, some dealer, and had it up for sale on Chrono 24. This watch is, if you like thin watches, and they use this like some kind of textile band to give it a more of a sporty look. Really an interesting watch. I mean, usually you associate a thin watch with a dress watch, with a formal watch. This is a fat watch, all right. That one is fairly thin though, and like I say, it's the world's thinnest. So if you like thin hand-wound watches, you got 2 millimeters thick. Really an interesting watch. Okay, now here is sort of what we might refer to as the plain vanilla Altiplano, and these watches are what I sort of think of as a Calatrava look to them. They're fairly, I don't want to use the word plain, but they're fairly formal in that respect. Here you have the one there. You have your indexes with no numbers, and this sort of an alternating between 2 sticks and 1 for each of the indexes. Very simple. Has that fumet that's reminiscent of Moser. 17,500. Hand wound. 3 hertz. I love it for that kind of watch. Now they have a number of, this particular one is brand new. It's one of their novelties. 24,600 for the, I think it's a meteorite dial on that one, on the sort of the yellow-brown one below there. And then the one next to it is in white gold is 16,200. Not a bad price, and it's the kind of watch that for a formal or even sort of like an executive office watch, I guess you could get away with it, especially with the white one. Just smooth, plain watch. Okay, moving right along. Now, we get into what are called the Black Tie series. And the Black Tie series is, you look at that and that's what it's for. It's for a very formal watch. This particular one it's called the Piaget Vintage Inspiration. I don't know who's in the naming department, but that's sort of like it certainly has vintage appeal to it. and it's just a big hunk of gold with a black dial and very clear indexes. Man, I tell you, this is something you get dressed up and you go to the casino in Monte Carlo in a tuxedo. This is a watch to wear. The movement in is Piaget 53 534P. It's an automatic mechanical movement, and 18 karat gold. Very, very clean watch. There's something about that watch I keep looking at. I'm not sure why. Now, the final two, these are also in the Black Tie series. One is called the Piaget Governor, and the other one's called the Imperator Tourbillon. Now, I was talking about a shape, and the Imperator shape goes way back in the Piaget history. And now, so this is why when somebody says, "Oh, that looks like a ripoff of a Aquanaut or something like that," probably not. I had thought that Gerald Genta had a hand in it, and the polo, and that turned out not to be the case. Rather, they were sort of using this Imperator type of shape around it. It's got with the cushion shape. Now, both of these watches have an ultra-thin tourbillon. The Governor on the left there is a Piaget 642D with it's ultra-thin and it's hand-wound. It also has an interesting moon phase at 6 o'clock, and the rest is pretty straightforward design on it with the tourbillon up at the top. The Imperator tourbillon it's a skeleton version, and you can see the micro rotor and the other most of the rest of the watch looking right at it. Has an interesting little. This one might be a challenge to tell time. The hands, the hour hand and the minute hand, are sort of pointing to different aspects of the gears. And so you have to sort of learn how to look at that watch and figure out what time it is in a relative time. I don't think it would be impossible, but it would be an interesting challenge, and it's certainly an interesting watch. Both of these watches are, called to find out what they cost, and my guess is that they're probably both north of 50,000. That would be my guess. I could be wrong. You have to call them up to get the exact price, but they certainly belong in the Black Tie series. Now, one of the things that some of you guys know Federico, and he has his own YouTube show, and he has his own business, Del Rey Watches. He used to work at the Piaget shop on Fifth Avenue in New York City. And I asked him, I sent him a PM and said, "Hey, you got anything interesting about Piaget that I might mention?" He had some really interesting things. He said, first of all, they make their own tools for their vintage watches. So if somebody has an old Piaget with a odd shape, something there's no tool for, you can get a tool or have them, if you send one in for service, they'll have the tools to deal with it. I thought that was interesting. They also have their own gemologist on the staff. You go into the boutique or one of their shops, and there's a staff gemologist. I'm sure they have one back at their offices in Switzerland. Thing about it is that one of the reasons they need a gemologist is that, especially on the women's watches, huge number of gems. I mean, really a lot of it. And as a watch manufacturer, watchmaker, I think the women's versions and variety are much greater than the men's. And so I think that was perhaps more of a primary market. The gentlemanly versions of watches have sort of faded to some extent, And I think that there are some of the real thin watches that they're making, and to give them the some kind of textile made out of Kevlar or something like that, watch band gives it more of a sort of a little more guy kind of thing, or go out and do guys stuff with it, without looking overly formal. But at the same time, you could wear that in a formal situation. So, but not a lot of the gyms. Those are all in the watches, for mostly for women that we talked about. Finally, the grandson of George Edward Piaget, Yves Piaget, visits the factory fairly regularly. And he's in his 90s or 80s or 90s or something, still flirts with the girls when he shows up. Interesting character. I said, it's been around for well over 100 years. It's probably as close to 150 years, as a matter of fact. And it's the same family thread as you can find in it. So anyway, for me, is that if you're looking for a much more formal men's watch, take a look at Piaget. They really have an interesting collection. They have tough competition, and I think the watches look very good. And I think from what I've seen of them, they do a very good job, especially if you're looking for something thin. Might be a choice you want to consider. Listen, if you have your own comments, I really like to hear them. And if you'd like to subscribe, this is an invitation to do so. Take care, and until next time, this is Bill Sanders for Watch Art Sci, the art and science of watch collection.